guys, in this video I'm going to teach you about stress and best ways to deal with stress. So why is knowing about stress important, and why is learning how to deal with stress important? It's because a little bit of stress is often a natural part of life and can help motivate people and encourage people to be productive, live healthy lives. But when stress gets too much or too little, it can be called de-stress. And so too much stress can lead to, too much de-stress, that is, can lead to many problems. Have you ever heard of the silent killer? So that's often what stress can be known as, because you don't really notice it at the time, but over time it builds up and can lead to problems like high blood pressure, which can lead to sudden heart attacks, can lead to strokes. Many people may not be the same for the rest of their life, just if they don't manage stress well. So it's important to manage it well. It can also lead to other medical and psychiatric problems like obesity, depression, anxiety, etc. So also why it's important to manage stress well is stress can affect learning and memory, making it more difficult to learn new information. It can also cause someone to change some of their behavior. Also affect learning and memory, making it more challenging or more difficult to learn new information. And it can also cause someone to change their behaviors or act in ways that they regret, such as like under stress, people may let their emotions get the best of them, so to speak. So they may yell, they may lie, they may cheat in order in a reaction to that stress. So we'll talk about what stress is, how it affects the body and mind, and some helpful reminders of how to manage stress. So let's just simply define stress as like any outside force that disrupts the body. It could be affecting the mind or the body. So the body is just a physiological principle, likes to be in a state of balance. Always likes to keep a steady state. So for example, if you get sick and you have the flu, that equilibrium may be out of balance because your body is going to generate an immune response or a system to sort of counteract the flu. Some other things that can cause stress in our life, maybe stress can be from just over time the room getting in disarray and disorderly, and you have clothes everywhere and stuff like that, and so you got to expend energy to try and organize things, put things tidy. Those are just some little manifestations of stress that can happen. Other times, maybe it's like extreme weather changes. Like if it's very cold, the body is not going to want to lose some of its heat, so it's going to constrict the blood vessels to keep the heat inside the body, and that sort of is a natural response that your body goes through. Over time, the body really likes to keep this calm, steady state of balance, and things that are stressful just can sort of bring that out of balance. So it's our job to sort of bring it back into that steady state. And so you may have various ways to manage stress. You may try to sleep it off. You may read, maybe go for a walk or exercise. There's various ways. Maybe it's eating healthy, praying. There's many things you can do. And so some important principles that I think are going to be important to keep in mind is you have to be disciplined. And let me give you an example. For example, if you have a homework assignment for school or a deadline to meet at work, and you cannot take yourself away from that video game or television show that you're watching, that's going to be stressful, especially if you're trying to get high marks on that exam or get really perfect for that deadline. So knowing your priorities are going to be important, and also discerning the right approach to the situation. All right.
So one way that could be helpful to deal with stress is to learn a little bit what stress does to the brain and the body, because it actually elicits this physiological response that brings our body out of balance. For example, it starts off in the brain, and the stress response can signal to a region of the brain here called the hypothalamus, which sends further signals or hormones to the pituitary gland, and that will send other signals to the rest of the body, like our adrenal glands, which then sends out a cascade of responses. So our nervous systems lead to a fight or flight response, or another response called the rest and digest. And so the fight or flight response is the stress response that we often go through when one experiences stress. One way to think of this is what would happen if you're being chased by a bear. You'll either be really afraid and run as fast as you can away from the animal, or you'll try to fight the animal to continue living. The fight or flight response will actually change the way the body acts. For example, the heart is going to pump faster and harder if you're running away from a bear, and that will move blood around to the muscles so you can run faster. Your lungs are going to be breathing quicker and deeper, so blood will also flow there. Your eyes will begin to open wide and dilate because you're going to be wanting to look on where to run or hide. And so less blood is going to be go into like your stomach and intestines, because you're not really going to be caring about resting and digesting, but instead you're going to be worried about running, and your muscles are going to have the blood so that you can be running away. So as you can see here on this diagram, there's that rest and digest response, and there's the stress response. And the rest and digest is like the natural response the body goes through when, for example, when one eats a big meal, that response will become active, and less blood will go to your muscles and more will go to your stomach and intestines, etc. But when that fight or flight response occurs, then the pendulum swings the other way, and that's also the stress response.
So too much stress or uncontrolled stress can have bad effects on the body. We know it can lead to not sleeping properly, either sleeping too much or sleeping too little. It can lead to unhealthy eating. So maybe you have all these unpleasant feelings or thoughts or emotions that the stress is generating, and so you may resort to eating quickly or eating junk food or eating something or even consuming something like drugs or alcohol in order to quiet some of those unpleasant feelings. And then a lot of these times that it can just lead to high blood pressure, other medical problems. And even we also know that too much stress or even too little stress can lead to problems such as anxiety and depression.
So anxiety is often attributed to an excessive amount of worries or racing thoughts. But as you can see here, according to this Beck Anxiety Inventory, there's also a lot of physical feelings that anxiety can be related. And going from top to bottom, we see it can cause people to feel wobbly in their legs, maybe unable to relax or sit still, the fear of the worst happening. They can get dizzy or lightheaded, feel like their heart is pounding or racing, a moment of unsteady, terrified or afraid, feeling nervous, choking, hands trembling, shaky or unsteady, fear of losing control, difficulty in breathing, fear of dying, scared, indigestion, faint or lightheaded, or face flush.
Anxiety and depression are often related. For example, it's been known that for that several years, in fact, King Solomon in the book of Proverbs says that anxiety in the heart of man causes depression. That's in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 25. So we've looked at some of the symptoms of anxiety already, and some of the symptoms of depression actually are a little bit different.
So I'd just like to highlight some of the common symptoms of depression and not go into too much detail here, but depression can really be attributed to what's finding in this scale. This is the PHQ-9, which is often given in doctors' offices. First, it's little interest or pleasure in doing things. Basically, are you enjoying life or not? Then you can go to feeling actually down, feeling depressed or feeling hopeless. Then it can affect sleep, can affect your energy, can affect appetite, and then one may feel bad about themselves, like their failure of let themselves or their family down. Another term for that is feeling guilty. Could be having trouble concentrating on things, moving or speaking so slowly, or on the opposite, being so fidgety or restless. And then lastly, and this is very severe, thoughts that you'd be better off dead or of hurting yourself in one way. Just a caveat, if anyone is having any thoughts of suicide, call 911, go to the nearest hospital, tell your friends or family, get help. We're not here to talk about that now. We're just here to highlight some of the symptoms of depression that often occur with anxiety and can be caused from too much or even too little stress. So now that we've talked about what stress is and some of the problems it can lead to, let's learn a little bit how to handle stress well. And so it's going to start with our values, or in other words, our values are our principles or standards of behaviors, or our judgment of what is important in life. And it helps us to be sure that what we're saying and doing is according to the person that we want to believe. And so we have to have these values in different stages of life: spiritual, family, education, friendships, and health. And for me, it's important to measure the values that I want according to what's in the Holy Bible. I mean, I am of the Christian faith, and so a lot of my faith or what I know how to live is through the Bible, and that helps me to guide my behaviors. And there's some really nice reminders in here on both the Old Testament and New Testaments. For example, in Isaiah chapter 49, verse 16, he reminds us, "See, I've inscribed you on the palms of my hands." So no matter how difficult or challenging or worried or uncertain times I feel, God is with me. And he knows about it, and he is watching over me very closely. Another great verse in the second line here is, "For he who touches you touches the apple of his eye." Anyone who's giving you a rough time, anyone, maybe it's a colleague, maybe it's a classmate, maybe it's a neighbor, God is with you, and he is able to support you through that as long as you trust in him. And then lastly, "But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Do not fear." So this is just a reminder that God knows everything, little aspect of our lives, and he's here to help us and protect us. And on a side note, just a little joke, even if you don't have hair, I'm sure he guides you and watches you as well. Another powerful verse that Christ reminds us is, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus."
So there's a hot topic nowadays called mindfulness, which is used to help deal with stress, anxiety, depression. So basically, all it's saying is, if you have a feeling or a thought in your mind, if you have a thought in your mind or a feeling in your body, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. You don't have to act on it. You don't have to dwell on it. You can sort of just recognize it and let it pass. The reason this is important is because we can be influenced by so many different things in our lives, and so we have to be careful, one, what we put into our senses, and just not blow things out of proportion, so to speak. So mindfulness is basically being aware of these thoughts and feelings that we're having, and to not act on them. And it's almost like some people recommend having certain time of days to really focus about this, or you could really focus about this in any routine activity that you're doing, such as brushing your teeth and focusing on all the sounds of that you're making with the brush hitting your teeth, and the smell of the toothpaste and the taste of the toothpaste. You can notice this when you're taking a shower, feeling the temperature of the water and the feeling of the water hitting your body, and just so really focusing in on that moment.
So if you recall, the verse that we said earlier in this lesson was that anxiety in the heart of man causes depression, but we didn't say the rest of the verse. The rest of the verse goes, "Anxiety in the heart of man causes depression, but a good word makes it glad." And that's so true today, and it reminds us of the importance of being thankful and expressing gratitude in every little thing of your life, and find the silver lining in everything, and the good and the bad.
So the more one experiences gratitude in their life, the more challenging it's going to be for anxiety and depression to creep in. So in any part of life, it's important to find a silver lining. Even one of the most difficult parts of life is when someone dies. But even if someone dies, there can be some good look at the situation, especially if you look at it in a way where maybe they're now in heaven and they're in a better place, because God promises that heaven is a better place than the struggles and challenges that one faces on earth.
Managing emotions, both negative and positive emotions, are going to be important and with managing stress. And here you can see a list of some of the common negative emotions that people may experience, and also some of the common positive emotions people may experience. So my initial intention was to talk about ways to get rid of negative emotions and increase positive emotions. But maybe if we can get enough likes on this video, I can do a future session that talks more about that topic. So some other ways to manage stress well is to be healthy, and that includes having healthy nutrition, such as not eating junk food, but eating more fruits and vegetables and healthy proteins. Just because junk food can not only lead to more medical problems like obesity and high blood pressure and diabetes, but also it can lead to mental health problems like anxiety and depression, which may make it more challenging to manage stress. Sleep is important. Oftentimes the guidelines given for sleep are 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. And then also exercise, both anaerobic and aerobic exercise, can help to deal with stress.
So what I've basically shared with you were a lot of psychological principles that help with managing stress. But it's important to note that these are just principles and recommendations, and it's not absolute truth. For example, I think if we put limitations on ourselves, that won't be good. For example, if we say we have to sleep 7 to 9 hours a day or 7 to 9 hours a night, and we don't get that, and we're not going to function our best selves, then you're doing yourself a disjustice, because we know there are always exceptions. And I think that humans can reach inhuman or unlimited possibilities through that grace of God, and there are many biblical examples of this and real life examples of this as well.
Viktor Frankl is a psychiatrist who's Jewish and imprisoned during Nazi Germany, and he wrote an inspiring book about his life called A Man's Search for Meaning, in which he details the really dire living conditions in the concentration camps, and he gives reasons to why some people were able to live through these conditions while others were not. And for him, it was based on his values and meanings in life, and he lived through those conditions with hopes to afterwards be able to complete his manuscript that he was working on and reunite with his family. And so this is why our values and our foundation and principles we live by is so important, because oftentimes it helps us to push us through the difficult and challenging times. And that's why I felt the need to share about Christianity in the lesson earlier, because that's a value that I found, or a way of living that's been really helpful for me in all aspects of life. Another role model who is inspiring to many people, in particular to those in the Coptic Orthodox faith, is Pope Kyrillos, who would wake up early in the morning, 3 or 4 in the morning, to prepare bread and to enjoy in the liturgy or the Mass. And he was probably one who was able to manage stress in amazing ways, including work miracles. Yet I doubt he got that 7 to 8 hours of sleep that was recommended by psychological and medical professionals, as we said before. Another inspiring role model is Father Dawood Lemy, who's a priest in Cairo, Egypt, and he writes this book that essentially describes the act of service or helping others, and how it's a solution to many problems. He describes different lives of people who have been struggling with something for several years, whether it's their marriage or their children or finances, and it causes a lot of pain and heartache in their life. And it's not until they began helping others which is also a healthy psychological method, such as altruistic behavior, and when their problems were solved.
So I hope you guys have enjoyed this lesson on stress management. Feel free to send comment or suggestions on other topics you want to go through. And if you have liked this or benefited from this from any way, please like the video and show your encouragement for more lessons to come.